It is Tuesday, April the 5th, and this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So, today, after the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare and the Star-Spangled Banner and the Pledge of Allegiance, we will have No Free Lunch, Shadowbosses, Chapter 10, and Evel Knievel from the book My Bicentennial Year. All that and more when I get back. Thank you. And now, the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for April the 5th. Your victories over Satan will release peace. My child, I will give you rest from all your enemies. I will give you peace and quietness to all my children. When your ways please me, I will make even your enemies to be at peace with you. I will give strength to you, and I will bless you with peace. Your salvation will come from me, and I will be your strength in the time of trouble. I will help you and deliver you and save you because you trust in me. Do not forget my law, and let your heart keep my commands. For length of days, long life, and peace will be added to you. Trust in me and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge me, and I will direct your paths. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 7, Psalms 29, verse 11, 37, verses 35 through 40. Prayer declaration. Father, I trust in you with all my heart, and I acknowledge you in all my ways. I will not depart from you or become wise in my own eyes. I will fear your name and depart from evil, for in so doing I will find health for my flesh and strength for my bones. Your kindness will not depart from me, nor will your covenant of peace be removed from my life. Great will be the peace of my children and grandchildren. Amen. And that was the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for April the 5th. Thank you. Who is the true conservative? He is religious and realistic. He is the person that understands that culture is the foundation for politics. He acknowledges a benevolent universe. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American. Thank you, thank you. What are the tactics in support of the strategy to rid America of socialist influence? The long-term tactics are to be a true conservative, talk like a conservative, act like a conservative, dress like a conservative, think like a conservative. The short-term tactics are rhetorical. True conservatives need to win all of the arguments. True conservatives need to defeat the useful idiots on the left that populate their households, workplaces, and churches. That means don't be neutral. Don't try to prove a negative. Don't take their word for it, and ask lots of questions. The useful idiots are the people that simply repeat the latest talking points. Thank you, thank you. What is the true conservative strategy for defeating socialists in this country? Number one, we must properly define conservatism. Then we must organize all potential conservatives under that definition. Once organized, we must dominate American culture. Dominating American culture means that we must rid ourselves of all the various cults the left has foisted upon us in this country. We rid ourselves of the left-wing cults by promoting value. What are the universal values? Number one, life. Number two, privacy. Number three, time. Number four, sanity. Number five, productivity. We defeat promiscuity by promoting family and privacy. Socialists must be driven from positions of power. And since it is lefty counterculture that provides the foundation for their political success, true conservatives must resist left-wing counterculture and promote normal American culture. By changing our culture, we will change our politics. And we change the culture by getting married, creating a family, and raising our children. Thank you, thank you. What are the true conservative political priorities? Number one, the abolition of abortion throughout the land. Number two, make nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons obsolete. Number three, the immediate decertification of all public employee unions. Number four, the immediate assignment of criminal and civil liabilities to all government regulators. Number five, the immediate repeal of the so-called Patriot Act. Number six, the immediate repeal of all emergency dictator laws. Number seven, the reinstatement of writs of outlawry. Number eight, government-sponsored recalls, ballot initiatives, and referendums. 9, a flexible minimum wage. And 10, means-tested health care. Thank you, thank you. What are the true conservative cultural priorities? Bring back not-for-profit news. Number 2, destroy the cult of promiscuity. Replace with an emphasis on privacy. Number 3, destroy the cult of neutrality with the effective use of propaganda. Number 4, destroy the cult of personality by emphasizing character. Number 5, destroy the cult of imagination, psychologists, and Hollywood. Number 6, destroy the cult of reinvention by admitting your mistakes. Thank you, thank you. The biggest mistakes that right-wing talk show hosts make. Number 1, they fail to consult their consciences. Number 2, they fail to listen to their own shows. Number 3, they aid and abet the left. Number 4, they demoralize their audiences. Number 5, they contradict themselves. Thank you. And now, there's no free lunch. Quote, "It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages." Unquote. Adam Smith. In this widely quoted excerpt from the great moral philosopher Adam Smith, a key reality of market economics is born: the benefits people in society receive from others acting in their own self-interest. This concept is the root of the profit motive, and it represents so much of the miracle of free enterprise. We cannot benefit ourselves without benefiting others. People will not pay us for goods or services they do not want or need. Out of this doctrine comes mutual cooperation, free exchange, and ultimately wealth creation. It is the miracle of free enterprise. And that was there's no free lunch. Thank you. And now the conclusion and the summary points for Chapter 10 of Shadowbosses. As we have seen, the key to curbing the influence of labor unions is to cut off the flow of money into their coffers. There are a number of ways to do this while strengthening workers' rights. States can break up the union monopoly over government employees, as Wisconsin did. States can enact right-to-work laws, as Indiana and Michigan did. The Supreme Court can curb the powers of unions to levy political assessments on non-members. The result is fewer workers forced to pay dues to a union and less income for the unions to spend on politics. The big takeaway, though, isn't just reducing union revenues, it's increasing workers' freedoms. Workers need to be able to decide whether or not to have a union in their workplace, and they need to decide whether or not they want to pay dues to a union. When workers are given these rights, unions will either diminish or unions will better serve the workers who choose to join them. To give workers a real voice, every unionized workplace should require a secret ballot election on a regular basis at least every few years. But few get this chance. For example, a staggering 93% of unionized government workers have never had the chance to vote on whether a union should represent their workplace. This is wrong. The people who work in the workplace today should decide whether a union should represent them, not be bound by the decision of their predecessors. In the end, we're all left with this conclusion: there should never be forced unionism in our nation. There should never be a place in any free nation for monopoly power granted over workers to shadow bosses. Chapter 10 Summary Points. Unions have drained riches from the heavily unionized states. To survive, unions must find new groups of Americans to unionize and expand further in right-to-work territory and federal workplaces. The federal authorization for union monopoly bargaining over private sector workers applies to all 50 states and all territories. It is not any more difficult to organize a workplace in a right-to-work state than in the other states. Federal laws establish the rules for organizing workers in all states. Unions have built a monumental voter registration, canvassing, and get-out-the-vote machine that is nearly unstoppable. To be viable in the future, the Republican Party will have to spend more money on putting boots on the ground and building a permanent political infrastructure, particularly in the battleground states. The party needs to invest in its own brand of community organizing on a permanent, year-round basis to counter the union's political infrastructure already in place. Union efforts to organize immigrant and Latino workers have the added benefit of cementing the alliance between Latinos and the Democrat Party. There should never be forced unionism in our nation. There should never be a place in any free nation for monopoly power over workers granted to shadow bosses. And that was Chapter 10 of Shadowbosses, and next time will be the conclusion of the book. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, from the book My Bicentennial Year, Chapter 6, Evel, Knievel. Well, we were all certainly excited for Friday's first game of the World Series, but I had more important things to worry about today. I had to get through a whole day of school and then go to church with Tyrone and practice my altar serving for Mass on Sunday. Sunday was to be my first time running the whole show. No Tyrone with me. He was enacting his plan to take some time off this Sunday. I had been working with Tyrone enough and wasn't too worried. Tonight, though, was a dress rehearsal for the real thing. Father H was going to be there as well. I got home and was instructed to eat something and get right down to church. I took my time eating, stretching it out as long as I could. My mom yelled up to me, "What on earth are you doing? Quit stalling and get moving." I shouted back, "I'm getting changed now." "Don't get changed. You can't go to church in your play clothes." Mom stated, Okay. I'll be going in a second," I yelled back. Then I heard what I call level 2 yelling, which required some action but not as much as a level 3 yell. "Get moving to church. You can't be late for God," shouted my mom. I tried to argue that I was not really going to see God, but to see Tyrone, who in no way resembled any picture of God. The argument, however, was lost on my mom, who insisted that Father H and Tyrone were doing God's work, and that if I was late for them, I would be late for God. I always tried to pick and choose my battles with Mom. This one I gave to her. I'd save my arguments for when I needed them most. I ran down to the garage and got my bike. My bike was standard issue for the times. I had high handlebars, squared black banana seat. It was bright yellow with a reflector on the back. We tried our best to make the bikes look like motorcycles. We put baseball cards with clothespins in the spokes, so the noise it created when you rode kind of made it sound like a motorcycle, at least to us. Mike C's was the coolest on the street. He had a lowrider. It was purple with black stripes. It had a black banana seat that sat down almost on top of the tire. He had extra high handlebars. It was definitely cool for just driving around, but when it came to jumping, it was hard to get it off the ground. I got on my bike and started for the church. The guys were all gathered around at the end of the street with their bikes. Russ had to be the smart ass and asked me where I was going. He knew darn well where I was going, but he had to make a big deal out of it in front of the guys. I told him, "Leave me alone. You know where I'm going. At least my parents care where I'm going." That line always burnt Russ pretty good. Over the summer, we were all going to go on a long bike ride for something to do. For bike rides past 3rd Street, we had to get permission from our moms. We had all asked our moms and headed to Russ's house to get him. We were all circling our bikes in Russ's driveway as Russ ran up his stairs and yelled into a screen door, "Can I go bike riding with the guys?" Back in a minute. Thank you. His father stormed through the screen door, grabbed Russ by his shirt collar, leaned over him so his foaming mouth was drooling on Russ, and yelled, "I don't care where you go or who you go with. Got that?" Then he threw Russ to the porch floor, and then he let go of his shirt, slammed the screen door shut, and went back inside. We all went over to Russ, picked him up, and got him on his bike. As we were starting biking out the driveway, Russ had tears in his eyes. I looked over at Russ and then around at the guys who'd all had their heads down, and I said aloud enough for all to hear, "At least he has all those penthouses." Everyone laughed, and we kept going like nothing happened. I guess Russ's dad had a little problem with hard liquor. Russ said he had some kind of disease. To us, that was the meanest thing we'd ever seen. So for me to throw it back at Russ like that was pretty mean. But once in a while, he had it coming. The guys were all milling around the end of the street, going back and forth to the big ditch on the side of Cobar Road. The ditch was on the other side of Cobar Road, right across from 4th Street. The side of Kobar Road dropped off into this big ditch, maybe 5 feet or so deep, and then another 4 or 5 feet across to another clay and rock-filled wall that ran 5 feet high. After the ditch, the cow grass ran back 25 feet until you got to the barbed wire that held in Bill Campbell's cows. As we were all now staring at the ditch on our bikes and looking at it, I turned to huge Gene, who was staring deeply into the ditch and kept looking back down 4th Street and then at the ditch and back again. "What are you thinking, Gene?" we all wanted to know. He made one more look down 4th Street and back up to the ditch and said, "I'm thinking I can jump it like Evel Knievel." Instantly the word "cool" came out of everyone's mouth. We looked around at each other and back at huge Gene. All kinds of questions to Gene now came up. "For real? You sure? Won't your mom be mad?" I looked at the guys, and the time was on my plastic NFL watch. It was black plastic, white background on the face, and each hour marked a different team's helmet, and said, "Well, it sucks, but I got to go to church and have 5 minutes to get there. Don't jump until I get back," I begged. Then I added, "I'll be back in an hour or so. You got to wait. Heck, you have got to eat supper anyways. Just wait. I can't miss this." I got the group to wait until I got back by saying they needed to build a ramp to make it more Evel Knievel-like. What do they mean?" they asked. I said that you all should throw some of the boulder rocks from the foundation house into the ditch. This was not only did he have to make the ditch, but just like Evel, he would be hurt if he missed. "Throw the boulders in," they yelled at huge Gene. I got to the church a few minutes late. No one, even God, seemed to mind. Father H. thanked me for coming again. We started right into training. Tyrone quizzed me as to what must be set up before the folks arrived, and Mass started. I answered with, "First the candles must be lit, 2 on the altar, 2 in the back, and 2 in the front." All agreed. Next, the books had to be placed out for Father H. and me. I needed to make sure that the wine and water chalices were full. I had to fill up the communion wafers in their chalice, and most importantly, that the lights and heater were turned on. Father H. always kept all the power off until absolutely necessary to save on the fuel bills. So I had to go to Mass a good hour before everyone else and set up. Back in a minute. Thank you. We proceeded right across the whole Mass. Father H. would say, "And here you go out to the front of the altar, help me collect the gifts from whomever brings them up, then place them on the altar. It's not a race, Mike. Take your time. God deserves reverence." He coached me as to where you hold the communion thing under people's chin, how to walk up the aisle in the procession, and then back down at the end of Mass. This went on for an eternity. Okay, half an hour or so, but it sure seemed longer. I had to get back before huge Gene jumped. I was finally dismissed after Father H., Tyrone, and I said the Our Father. I jumped on my bike and started racing home. I even got up to the balls to take the shortcut. The shortcut I was normally afraid to take because the older kids from around the town hung out there. They were actually townies. Our section of the town was the new development kids. The townie kids did not necessarily appreciate us for some reason. The shortcut called for taking the gravel road that followed the railroad tracks for about a half a mile, but it shaved a whole bunch off the total trip. I zoomed down the gravel road next to the tracks, standing up with my head down to gain leverage and cut down the wind resistance. I was flying. Once you made it off the gravel road, you crossed onto a small dirt path that led over to Kobar Road. Then it was a straight shot home to 4th Street. I was feeling pretty good that none of the goons were out and was just about ready to make my turn on the dirt path. I raised my head to make sure I found the path, and as I looked up, I saw rocks shooting at my face. Thank God the rocks missed me. I looked around quickly, and there was Big Bad Billy Dranowitz, laughing with some of the other local thugs. By this time in our short lives, Billy had moved from our gang to the 3rd Street gang and was now hanging with the townies, who we, for some reason, called the Fritters. For some reason, Big Bad Billy hated us. He hated us even more when he was hanging with the Fritters. When he was by himself, he tolerated us. When he's with the Fritters, he took his hatred to another, more physical level. The rock throwing, the sight of Billy and the Fritters, and the turn in the dirt path happened in the same instant. I did not have time to react, so instead, in a huge state of panic, and then uneven dirt path coupled with the turning of front wheel, while at the same time standing up over for better leverage, I flipped over the handlebars. My head went straight into the ground. The bike did a 360 in the air over me, my glasses flying into the grass. Hurt though I was, I quickly got up, looked for and found my glasses, started picking up my bike, jumping back on it in the same motion. I looked up and saw Big Bad Billy and the rest of Fritters running towards me. I started pedaling as fast as I could, rocks and dirt bombs flying past me, whizzing my ears like bullets in the cowboy movies. The Fritters, I guess, had better things to do because they stopped chasing me after a while. When I finally got back to our corner of the world, I was afraid that I'd missed the jump of evil. I found, much to my relief, the gang still milling around the ditch, though by now they had assembled the ramp, which, not to knock their engineering prowess, was a piece of old plywood resting on a cinder block. It gave huge Gene about an extra foot or so of height for his jump. Brad looked at me and said, "What the heck happened to you? Your shirt is ripped on the shoulder and you're covered with grass stains. I thought you were going to church." Big Bad Billy and the Fritters was all I had to say, and they knew that an episode had taken place. But no need to fixate on that. We had a jump to get on with. The guys did feel a little sorry for me because they knew that I was in for some screaming when I did get home. It was a mortal sin to ruin your school clothes, no matter whose fault it was. Huge Gene at this point was making his practice runs. I'm sure he thought to himself that he was Fonz on Happy Days jumping the 14 garbage cans, which we all saw on TV just a few weeks ago. Huge Gene was starting from about 100 yards away from the ramp. Then he would slowly ride up to the top of the ramp. He would stop on top of the ramp, bounce around a little bit, testing the stability of the plywood. Would it hold, he wondered. We were happy to act as his ground crew. Mike C. even suggested that he make it more challenging for him, that to make it more challenging for him, we should throw some more boulders on top of the rocks they had placed in the ditch earlier. All agreed rocks and boards and everything we could quickly scrounge up was now at the bottom of the ditch. Back in a minute. Thank you. In the meantime, Brad thought it was a good idea to protect his brother a little bit and that he should have a helmet. The best Brad could do was come back from his house with Gene's old football helmet. Brad walked over to Gene and handed it to him very formally, as if he was giving him Superman's cape. Gene placed the helmet on head, a spray-painted gold helmet, trying to emulate the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame, climbed back on his bike, and slowly rode down the street to his starting point. He took one last practice run, slowly working his way down the street, making sure of the track to the ramp. He came up the ramp, again stopped at the top, and looked over the edge while slightly bouncing on the ramp. He carefully studied the rocks, the gap he was to cross, and the grass he was to land on. He was ready. He made his way back down to his starting point. We lined the track to the ramp. He looked down, took a deep breath, and adjusted his helmet. He fastened the chin strap. He gave us the high sign, brought his arm down, and gave us a salute. We stood at attention and saluted him back. Taking Care of Business was one of Huge Gene's favorite tunes, and it seemed appropriate that we all know now slowly started singing the song. Gene jumped up in the air, hands on the handlebars, landed his feet on the pedals, and started pumping himself down the road. As he came near to Cobar Road now, only a short 20 feet from the ramp, my father's Plymouth Fury 3 wagon turned down 4th Street. Poor Dad, heading home from a rough day at the office, late as usual, was now turning down the street with Huge Gene heading right at him. My father saw Huge Gene's gold helmet and slammed on the brakes. A very loud screeching noise could now be heard all up and down the street. Huge Gene, however, was in the zone. He was taking care of business. He kept right on pedaling, swerving around the Fury 3 as he passed my dad. He turned and gave him a head nod. He hit the ramp, lifted the front of the bike. He soared over the ditch, hit the grass. We let out a round of cheers, clapped, and screamed the word decent. Just then, as Gene was making his landing on the grass, was something we had all overlooked. Not more than 10 feet from the edge of the ditch, Gene had landed on what was Father Campbell's barbed wire fence. As soon as Gene hit the grass, he realized the fence was immediately upon him. He went right into it. If barbed wire was razor wire, Gene would have been sliced into 3 even pieces. Instead, his front tire hit the bottom piece of wire and flipped huge Gene right over the fence. He landed flat on his back and jumped up, pumping his fists. He had taken care of business. He had made it. We all ran over and continued the celebration. Until, that is, my father got out of the Fury 3 wagon. My father, to his credit, did not yell. He didn't have to. Mrs. Tidwell, who upon hearing the screeching from my dad's car came running out to the street. As a matter of fact, all the moms came running out. When they saw my dad's car in the middle of the street and smoke coming from the screech marks, they assumed someone had died and started yelling at my dad with things like, "Who did you hit?" My father explained as quickly as he could what happened, and then the moms looked over at all of us. They said not a word at first, their eyes all moving at the same time, first focused on the ramp, then boulders and concrete blocks in the ditch, then the barbed wire fence, then my ripped shirt, then huge Gene in his football helmet. Then, as if led by some cosmic force, each of their arms pointed us to respective houses. And so began the Baton Death March, one more time. We were slowly and quietly marched back for punishment, for the crime of stupidity and accessory to stupidity. If I had to hear, "Don't you know Gene could have died," one more time that evening, I think I would have died. And that's the end of Chapter 6, Evel Knievel. And next time will be Chapter 7, the World Series Game 1 of the Fall Classic. Back in a minute. Thank you. Who is the socialist? He is the man that is spiritual. He's the man that seeks consensus. He's subjective, petty, and small, taking everything in life personally. He's outrageous, boring, and rude. He pretends to be a leader and a change agent. He pretends that he's your friend. He is sly, cunning, and deceptive. He dresses, acts, and speaks like a slob. He is informal and terminally unique. He is childish and pretends that he knows nothing. He has no conscience and pretends that might makes right and that the ends justify the means. He is impulsive and rationalizes his behavior. He is deterministic, blaming others for his mistakes. He is skeptical, demanding that others solve his problems. His unreasonableness and irresponsibility make him a bad role model, bad father, brother, family member, friend, and a bad person, period. So if you think that you can be friends with a socialist, think again. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you to tune in to the John and Ken Show, which is an excellent example of how true conservatives communicate. It's a radio show that's on KFI AM 640 from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 6 o'clock in the evening, Monday through Friday. And that's Pacific time. So that's an excellent show to listen to. And other than that, until next time, remember to be honest, to be smart, to be beautiful, and to remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.